I was down at the port last week talking to a friend who works in logistics. We were just watching the ships come in. It's hypnotic, really. You see this vessel the size of a skyscraper lying on its side, just gliding into the channel, dwarfing everything around it. He pointed up at one of the massive gantry cranes lifting containers off it, a giant red machine moving with this weird, precise grace. See that? He says, ZPMC. Built in Shanghai. He then pointed at the ship itself. That one, CSSC, also Shanghai. He tapped the steel container sitting on a truck right in front of us. This box, CIMC, Shenzhen. He gave this little sigh and said, we're just the parking lot. I think that one line. We're just the parking lot. It really stuck with me. This entire massive artery of global trade, the very backbone of how everything you own gets to you. And it felt like we were just watching someone else's machinery run on our property. It makes you realize this level of dominance doesn't just happen by accident, it happens by design. And that design is exactly what we are deep diving into today. Our mission is to understand how China moved from being just a major player in the global maritime sector to becoming, well, the clear dominant architect of the global supply chain. We're pulling apart the livers, the binding industrial policies, the massive capital investments, the drive for indigenous technological mastery, and yeah, the strategic layering of digital control that underpin this rise. We're not just looking at the final score, but at the comprehensive generations-long playbook that kind of made it inevitable.
Yeah, it's a crucial framework for understanding global trade, really, in the 21st century. What you witnessed at the port, that's the physical manifestation of decades of highly coordinated, centralized policy. This narrative isn't simply about successful manufacturing or, cheap labor. It's a detailed story of systematic, long-term economic strategy, driven by binding national targets, strategic investments in state-owned enterprises, and deep technological integration. China's industrial ascent in the maritime sector is fundamentally rooted in its capacity to rapidly scale, leverage resources really efficiently, and achieve just unparalleled market share across the entire logistics chain. I mean, from the hull of the ship itself to the digital ledger tracking the cargo, it's all connected.
Okay, let's unpack this with some immediate reality checks then. When my friend called our port the parking lot, he was speaking from a position of, well, profound dependency that most consumers never really consider. We often talk generally about manufacturing output, but what do the sheer undeniable numbers look like right now, specifically in the maritime world, in shipbuilding?
Right. Well, the statistics are not just impressive, they're completely decisive. They represent a fundamental shift in global industrial power, no question. As of 2023, China delivered a staggering 51% of new gross tonnage globally. 51%. This cements its position as the undisputed world leader. And to give context to that figure, you have to contrast it with the next closest competitors. South Korea, they delivered 28.3%, and Japan was at 15.4%.
Wow. So it's startling how concentrated this critical global industry has become. Those three East Asian nations collectively account for, roughly 95% of all global shipbuilding output?
Exactly.
But what we're seeing is China not just being part of that dominance, but actively pulling away from its closest, technologically sophisticated neighbors.
Precisely. And the nature of the ships being built really highlights a strategic focus. China has leveraged its scale to dominate these high-volume, cost-effective segments, the ones essential for global commodity flows. Take bulk carriers, for instance. These are the vessels critical for moving raw materials like iron ore, coal, grain. Well, China was responsible for 30.7% of all bulk carrier global deliveries in 2023. And in fact, if you look at the measure of compensated gross tonnage CDT, which accounts for labor complexity, China held 53% of the global CGT share for bulk carriers in the period just before that. They are the undeniable global engine for raw material transport capacity. Simple as that.
And then there are container ships. I mean, the vessels that literally carry our global economy.
Yeah, container ships are the workhorses, definitely. And that segment accounted for 35.3% of China's 2023 deliveries. What's important here is that these aren't just, say, niche, complex vessels, which South Korea traditionally focused on. These are the large, volume, scalable, cost-competitive ships that define the modern logistics system. By dominating both bulk carriers and a significant share of container ship production, China ensures its capacity dictates the overall flow and, frankly, the pricing structure of global logistics.
Right. But the true depth of this dominance, the part that really makes us feel like the parking lot, goes far beyond the hull of the ship itself, doesn't it? It's the entire ecosystem of ancillary components required to make that ship functional and the port operational, the hardware my friend pointed out that day. That's where the control becomes truly systemic.
That's precisely the most profound insight into this strategy, I think. China hasn't just built shipyards. It has systematically targeted and achieved control over the foundational hardware. the stuff that is absolutely essential for global logistics to function, the choke points of physical flow. Let's go back to the gantry cranes you mentioned, those massive, iconic structures moving containers from ship to shore. The company Shanghai Zhenhua Heavy Industries, ZPMC, builds over 70% of the world's ship-to-shore gantry cranes.
70%. 7 out of every 10 of those skyscraper-sized machines moving millions of containers worldwide are built by one Chinese company. And those cranes are often highly automated network machines too. What does that kind of physical monopoly mean for global port operations?
Well, it means profound dependency. If a key component breaks, if software needs updating, if you need spare parts, most major ports globally have to turn to a single source. And furthermore, these aren't just inert pieces of steel, they are network devices operating on proprietary control systems. This creates both commercial leverage and, as we'll probably discuss later, significant strategic opportunities.
That kind of market penetration is hard to even wrap your head around. Does the same story repeat across other key logistical hardware components?
It absolutely does, and it really demonstrates the coherence of the industrial planning. China commands 95% of the world's shipping container production. 95%. That overwhelming dominance comes largely from one major player, China International Marine Containers, or CIMC. That's the company that made the box your friend tap that day at the port.
Wow.
Think about that. Nearly all the metal boxes that carry, 90% of global trade are manufactured in one country? This gives China exceptional control over global container capacity and pricing. And resilience, too, against any form of supply chain disruption. If global container availability tightens up, China holds the key.
So they control the manufacturing of the box, the mechanism that lifts the box off the ship, and a massive portion of the ships that carry the box. What about ground transport? The container still needs to get from the port to the warehouse, right?
Yeah, that's the final piece of this logistical trifecta of hardware. China also produces an estimated 86% of intermodal chassis globally. These are those steel frames, used to attach the containers to trucks for road transport. So when you realize that they build the ships, the loading hardware, the containers, and the road frames, you see the system is truly deeply integrated.
It's not just physical dominance. It sounds like an economic moat built out of steel and automation. When you look at those statistics, 70% of cranes, 95% of containers, 86% of chassis, you're realizing that almost all essential physical infrastructure for maritime trade runs through a single country's industrial base. It's incredible.
And that integrated physical dominance creates incredible resilience for their own supply chains and, immense leverage over others. But the story of control doesn't stop with manufacturing. It extends to ownership and operational influence as well. Recently, China actually overtook Greece to become the world's largest maritime fleet owner in terms of gross tonnage. They achieved 249.2 million GT.
Okay, so why is ownership of the physical fleet, the gross tonnage, why is that so significant, especially when they already have all the manufacturing leverage we just discussed?
Fleet ownership is critical because it enhances China's ability to influence global freight rates, especially in those volatile charter markets. When you own the biggest fleet, you tend to be a price setter, not just a price taker.
Yeah.
And crucially, it allows Chinese state-owned enterprises, think Costco Shipping, to prioritize the security of their own supply lines, particularly for critical strategic materials like oil and iron ore. If there's a geopolitical event or a market shock, they have the physical capacity under their own control to ensure those key flows continue uninterrupted, which is a massive source of national economic security and, frankly, diplomatic clout in strategic choke points.
Right.
So you build the ships, build the cranes, build the containers, and own the largest fleet to move them. Well, you are in a position to set the terms of global trade, not just participate in it.
That systemic level of coordinated control, as we've established, clearly isn't accidental. It's the direct output of focused, centralized government policy. So this brings us to the strategic blueprint, the national plans that tie all these disparate, massive industries together, ensuring they're all moving in a unified, strategic direction. For listeners who might be unfamiliar with the mechanics of China's economy, what is the fundamental mechanism driving this integration and, adherence?
Right. The mechanism is China's unique system of comprehensive national plans, most notably the current 14th five-year plan. In a, let's say, purely market-driven economy, industrial goals are often suggestive or maybe aspirational. In China, adherence to these industrial plans is effectively mandatory, especially for the big state-owned enterprises, the SOEs, but it's also heavily incentivized for non-state actors too. This allows the central government to mobilize capital, land, massive human resources toward achieving very specific, quantifiable national goals over decades, rather than just letting short-term market fluctuations dictate development, which can happen elsewhere.
Okay, so it's not simply a wish list. It's more like an engineering blueprint where every major actor has a required role in constructing the final industrial infrastructure. This provides that unified direction that market-driven competitors often lack when trying to tackle massive generational industrial shifts, like, say, pivoting from basic manufacturing to high-tech shipbuilding.
Precisely. And a key program that really accelerated this shift in the maritime sector is Made in China 2025, or MIC 2025. You've probably heard of it. This initiative explicitly targeted 10 strategic manufacturing sectors for technological upgrade and enhanced indigenous mastery. That's the key phrase. And maritime engineering equipment and high-technology ships were right there among the core targets. The goal was to move China beyond being merely the world's largest ship mass producer and transform it into a high-tech, self-sufficient industry leader, capable of building the most complex, high-value vessels out there.
That concept of indigenous mastery really seems like the core engine of this strategic blueprint, doesn't it? It's about building an economic fortress that is self-reliant, ensuring China isn't dependent on foreign components, particularly when building advanced high-value vessels like massive LNG carriers or, advanced naval ships.
It is absolutely foundational. It addresses a historical strategic vulnerability. For decades, even as China mastered the steelwork and assembly of hulls, it remained reliant on foreign original equipment manufacturers, OEMs, for critical high-technology components, the complex, high-margin machinery, the brains and heart of the ship. So the industrial strategy included aggressive domestic content goals to remedy this. A binding target was set: achieve 85% domestic content for marine equipment installed in Chinese-built ships by 2025.
And when we talk about marine equipment, what specific technologies were historically the most challenging, the ones they really had to sprint to indigenize?
We're talking about the high-tech heart of the ship, really. Historically, Chinese shipyards struggled with sophisticated, large-bore marine diesel engines, the giant motors that power global shipping. They also lacked mastery over complex propulsion systems, integrated bridge control systems, and specific high-pressure pumps and valves. And for advanced vessels, this included things like cryogenic handling systems for liquefied natural gas, LNG carriers, that requires extremely precise engineering to manage ultra-cold fuel. Overcoming these dependencies required massive coordinated R&D investments and sometimes technology transfer mandates.
And how successful have they been in achieving this challenging localization goal? Has it worked?
The progress has been transformative, honestly. By 2015, just a few years into the sustained push, China was already sourcing over 90% of inputs for standard ship production domestically. This gave them the highest domestic import ratio among all major shipbuilding economies, higher than Korea, higher than Japan. This meant that the reliance on foreign OEMs for standard components was effectively eliminated, which significantly reduced external supply chain risk and enhanced their autonomy and control, made them far more resilient against global disruptions or potential geopolitical pressure. The push for 85% domestic content by 2025 is specifically targeting the high-technology components now, bridging that remaining gap. That pursuit of self-sufficiency also involves streamlining the industry itself, right? You can't achieve industrial mastery by spreading resources across dozens of small competing yards. We see consolidation being mandated as part of the overall structural strategy. That's the structural component aimed at efficiency and market power, yes. National targets were set to ensure the top 10 shipbuilding companies accounted for over 70% of national annual output. This was designed to eliminate fragmented capacity, increase operational efficiency through sheer scale, and ensure the remaining players had the necessary heft to compete globally.
The prime example, I guess, being the merger of those two massive state-owned enterprises, the China Shipbuilding Industry Company, CSIC, and the China State Shipbuilding Corporation, CSSC. That sounds less like a corporate merger and more like the creation of an industrial superweapon.
That's a fair analogy, actually. This was definitely not a voluntary market-driven merger. It was directed pursuant to state work plans. CSAC was historically focused on the north, and CSSC primarily in the south. When they merged their parent entities in 2019, they formed the world's largest shipbuilding group, employing nearly 1 million people. It's enormous. This strategic unification allows for unprecedented collaboration, resource pooling, and diversification across commercial, naval, and offshore engineering sectors.
What were the tangible benefits realized from creating such a colossal entity? What did they gain?
Oh, the benefits are manifold. First, it achieved the requisite scale to handle gigantic, multi-billion-dollar global orders, matching or even exceeding the capacity of South Korea's largest yards. Second, it mandated the sharing of intellectual property and technological advancements that had been achieved independently, accelerating those indigenous mastery goals we talked about. Third, it provided unified pricing power, enabling the state entity to influence global market rates for new builds. So this coordinated restructuring ensures that the largest shipbuilding player is structurally robust enough to meet both intense commercial demand and national strategic objectives, seamlessly linking economic and security goals.
Okay, so the blueprint is the roadmap, and industrial scale is the structure, but capital is the engine that drives this massive machine forward. We really need to talk about how state-backed finance fundamentally rewrote the rules of the global shipbuilding market, especially in the wake of the 2008 financial crisis, when Western capital was largely retreating.
Right. The financial support provided by the state is massive, and, crucially, it's deployed with long-term strategic intent. For decades, global ship financing was dominated by major European and Western banks. That was the norm. However, following 2008, as traditional financing dried up, Chinese state-owned banks rapidly moved to fill the void. This wasn't accidental. It was a deliberate policy move to support China's growing industrial capacity.
Which state institutions were the primary drivers of this financial expansion? Who was writing the checks?
The leaders were the Export-Import Bank of China, CXM, and the Bank of China. They aggressively expanded their portfolios, not just lending to Chinese firms, but increasingly to international ship owners as well. By 2018, these two institutions alone held significant shipping portfolios that totaled a combined $33.5 billion. This rapid ascent meant Chinese state capital was suddenly a major, if not the major, source of global ship finance, a huge shift.
That's a rapid, purposeful expansion into a critical capital-intensive sector. How does this capital provide a unique competitive advantage to Chinese shipyards? How does it help them win deals?
It creates what you might call a financial firewall, or maybe a subsidized economic moat. State-owned banks are directed by industrial guidelines to provide preferential loans, often with lower interest rates or extended repayment periods, and debt relief sometimes to SOE shipbuilders. This ensures that Chinese yards have access to cheap, plentiful capital for infrastructure upgrades, research and development, and capacity expansion. It insulates them from commercial market fluctuations.
And this translates directly into highly competitive, maybe subsidized pricing for international customers, doesn't it?
Absolutely. The ability to access cheap state finance allows Chinese yards to offer highly competitive vessel pricing, sometimes enabling them to significantly undercut their both Korean and Japanese competitors. Estimates suggest this advantage can amount to a 20% to 30% discount on the final price. That's huge in this business. And moreover, foreign ship owners are often incentivized to place new orders with Chinese yards in exchange for favorable state-backed financing packages from CXM or Bank of China.
Ah, so it's a package deal.
Exactly. It's a compelling package.
Yeah.
Build your ship where you can also get the cheapest money to pay for it. It's hard to resist.
To truly contextualize the scale of this financial mobilization, what are the best available estimates for the total state backing poured into this sector? It must be enormous.
This is where the numbers become truly staggering. One widely cited analysis estimates that Chinese firms in the shipping and shipbuilding industries received approximately $132 billion in total state support between 2010 and 2018.
$132 billion.
Yes. And the overwhelming majority of this, about $127 billion, was in the form of financing from state-owned banks. That's on top of several billion dollars in direct subsidies. To put this into perspective, this level of investment is monumental compared to the sector's total global revenue during that period. It demonstrates the state's readiness to mobilize colossal resources to effectively buy global market share and achieve dominance, reshaping global competition through subsidized capital.
Okay, beyond this direct financial leverage, let's look at the foundational cost structure, the sort of hidden efficiencies and internal subsidies that keep production costs low even before the financing is applied.
That structural advantage is key to long-term sustainability, absolutely. Chinese shipyards benefit from mechanisms like discounted land leases for shipyard infrastructure. That's a significant reduction in overhead costs provided by local governments who are eager to meet their own industrial targets. And crucially, they also receive advantageous pricing on essential inputs, particularly steel. Steel can account for, 15 to 20% of a ship's construction cost?
And China has massive domestic steel capacity, which must be playing a role here. That connection seems obvious.
It's directly connected. China accounts for something like 72% of global steelmaking capacity growth since the year 2000. That created massive domestic overcapacity. This naturally depresses domestic steel prices, allowing firms like CSSC to source inputs at a significant cost advantage compared to their international rivals, who often have to purchase steel at global market rates. This ability to integrate and internally subsidize key inputs is a profound structural advantage.
The state has even gone so far as to actively generate demand when global orders were slowing, essentially counteracting the cyclical nature of the industry.
That was the, well, I'd say, brilliance of the scrap and build policy, which ran between 2010 and 2017. This program used substantial subsidies to incentivize ship owners to prematurely scrap older, inefficient vessels. By doing this, the government artificially accelerated the demand for replacement ships precisely when the global market was in a downturn, right after the financial crisis.
So it didn't just support the shipyards, it strategically managed global fleet turnover to benefit Chinese capacity during a weak period.
That's clever.
Exactly. This policy alone led to a significant measurable increase in both ship demolitions and new build orders placed in China between 2012 and 2015. While the precise value was complex to track, analysts estimated the government spent around $1.2 billion just between 2010 and 2015 on this policy alone. It was very tactical use of state funds to expand market share rapidly during a period when rivals were just struggling to maintain capacity.
Now, what's fascinating is how China continues to adapt this strategy to meet the newest global challenges, specifically the global mandate for green shipping and decarbonization. This requires massive technological and infrastructure pivots, which must be difficult.
This shift is perhaps the clearest indicator of their industrial resilience and strategic foresight. South Korea and Japan historically led in advanced niche markets like large LNG carriers, and they are now pioneering vessels fueled by ammonia or methanol. Recognizing the inevitability of new global environmental regulations, China adapted rapidly to seize the next generation of orders. They didn't want to be left behind.
What mechanism did they use to jump into the lead on green shipping? How do they manage that pivot?
Well, surprise, surprise, they leveraged state capital once again. Recognizing that domestic ship owners needed encouragement to invest in expensive new technology, China introduced significant new subsidy programs in August 2024. These programs specifically encourage the domestic fleet to upgrade to eco-friendly, fuel-efficient vessels. The subsidies are substantial, varying based on the vessel type and age being scrapped, and can reach up to, I think, $210 per ton of capacity. This creates immediate subsidized domestic demand for the newest green designs.
And the competitive response to this policy shift, how quickly did they manage to corner this emerging market?
The initial results are pretty overwhelming. By the first 3 quarters of 2024, China secured over 70% of global orders for eco-friendly vessels across all major ship types. That includes dual-fuel container ships and bulkers. It demonstrates a strong, adaptable position to dominate the emerging green shipbuilding market, ensuring that as global environmental rules tighten, they are positioned to lead the next generation of vessel production. Furthermore, they're rapidly bridging historical technological deficits in those niche, high-value markets. For example, in 2024, they secured 62 orders for LPG carriers, nearly matching South Korea's 59 orders. That shows a relentless and targeted effort to achieve indigenous mastery in every major ship class.
Okay, moving from the physical assets and the financial engine, let's shift into this strategy that integrates the commercial world with national security military civil fusion, or MCF. This strategy, driven from the top down, seems to create powerful economic and security synergies that lower costs and enhance strategic readiness in the maritime sphere. How does MCF manifest specifically within shipbuilding and port infrastructure?
Right, the MCF strategy is absolutely central to achieving the national goal of developing a world-class military by 2049, primarily by maximizing the utility of the vast civilian economy to support defense goals. It's about leveraging everything. In shipbuilding, the benefits are immediately apparent. Commercial shipbuilding provides massive economies of scale, a highly trained, specialized workforce, and vast R&D and design infrastructure. Since many major Chinese naval yards, the ones building destroyers and aircraft carriers, also build commercial ships under the giant CSSC umbrella, the profits and volume from foreign commercial orders directly benefit and effectively lower the cost of naval construction projects. It's a direct subsidy.
So effectively, every large commercial order placed by a foreign shipping company subsidizes the national defense industrial base by covering overhead, maintaining capacity, and perfecting design infrastructure. Is that right?
Precisely. It's a built-in efficiency that Western industrial bases often cannot replicate due to the legal and structural separation between defense and commercial enterprises. This dual-use benefit is structurally integrated into the design of the entire industrial conglomerate. It's not an afterthought.
And this dual-use doctrine extends directly to the ports themselves. They aren't just commercial logistics hubs in this view.
Correct. Under the MCF doctrine, ports are designated as strategic assets, designed for both optimal commercial logistics and rapid conversion into military support bases during times of crisis. This means that infrastructure design isn't just based on maximizing container throughput. It involves enhanced structural strength in the docks, berths, and access channels. It mandates increased storage capacity for critical strategic materials like fuel and emergency supplies. And it requires robust, redundant communication and connectivity systems built in from the start.
Can we point to specific local examples of how this integration plays out in Chinese port operations, linking commercial efficiency with strategic capability?
Yes, definitely. Ports like Shenzhen and Guangzhou are utilizing sophisticated systems based on big data and artificial intelligence in their dock management. On the surface, this boosts commercial efficiency, making the ports faster, more reliable, minimizing delays, great for business. But simultaneously, this digital infrastructure strengthens tactical supply planning for military logistics. It enhances intelligence collection on cargo flows and vessel movements, and it provides broader monitoring functions that serve defense-related capabilities. The technological architecture of a smart port is inherently dual use.
That digital infrastructure layer leads us directly to the strategic concept of LoJink. This feels like the ultimate control layer, almost like a state-backed digital super app over global logistics data. This moves the competitive battleground from the physical realm to the informational realm, doesn't it?
LoJink, yeah. The National Transportation and Logistics Public Information Platform. It is indeed a massive state-backed system designed to integrate maritime logistics data across every node of the supply chain. Its primary strategic function, really, is to secure an overwhelming informational advantage for Chinese entities in the nearly $1 trillion third-party logistics industry.
What kind of information is flowing through LoJink, and why is access to that data so strategically powerful? What can they do with it?
LoJink aggregates and synthesizes granular data on pretty much everything flowing through the logistics system. We're talking real-time cargo location, precise movement timing, freight carrier price quotes, customs clearance information, and critically detailed cargo valuation. This data gives Chinese actors privileged, real-time insight into global goods flows, pricing dynamics, and supply chain vulnerabilities. And that can be leveraged to understand market demand, strategically undercut commercial transactions, and ultimately displace competitors.
It sounds almost like having a cheat sheet for the global supply chain exam. I read an industry insider noted that the risk of LoJink is that it simply helps Chinese companies grow faster because of its data insights.
That is the fear, yes, and it's a structural one. By leveraging the sheer vastness of the domestic Chinese economy, which is the single largest consumer and producer market in the world, LoJink is positioned to become the dominant global standard for digital logistics tracking. Every foreign entity wanting seamless access to the Chinese market is heavily incentivized, maybe even pressured, to use the platform.
And once foreign entities begin using it, they become strategically dependent on it.
Exactly. This increases foreign strategic dependency on China by essentially controlling the digital infrastructure layer of global shipping. By gaining market share and taking an active role in international standard-setting bodies, especially in areas like electronic bills of lading and customs documentation, LoJink aims to influence global data governance norms in a way that favors Chinese firms and enhances their competitive advantage. It ensures that China controls not only the physical flow of goods, but also the sensitive, valuable data about those flows.
Okay, so we've covered the manufacturing dominance, the coordinated state capital, the push for indigenous mastery, and this integrated digital and defense strategy. The final layer of this multifaceted success story seems to be the global projection of this power, primarily through the Belt and Road Initiative, the BRI. How does this industrial dominance translate into global influence and commercial leverage outside of China's borders?
Right, the BRI's Maritime Silk Road component is essentially the foreign policy mechanism that projects this industrial strength globally. It functions as a comprehensive, integrated system. The core goals are securing trade routes through worldwide port development, while simultaneously increasing the demand for Chinese-built vessels and logistical equipment. It creates a powerful, mutually reinforcing loop. New port infrastructure requires Chinese engineering, needs Chinese cranes from ZPMC, and needs Chinese-built ships from CSSC to service them, knitting together the global supply chain under one industrial umbrella.
And what does the data show in terms of the shipbuilding export surge connected to the BRI? Is there a clear link?
Oh, it's highly correlated. China's ship exports to countries formerly involved in the BRI surged by 35% just between 2013 and 2020. More broadly, Chinese shipyards now account for over 50% of global ship exports, with a substantial and growing portion destined for BRI partner nations. Countries designated as strategic maritime nodes within the initiative, places like Pakistan, Malaysia, Egypt, have become major recipients of these vessels. This directly links China's shipbuilding success to its geopolitical and long-term strategic trade goals. It's not just business.
This expansion requires strategically controlling nodes ports across the world to secure those trade routes physically. What's the scope of China's footprint in overseas ports now? How widespread is it?
The scope is immense and highly strategic. China has systematically acquired stakes in or operates at least 96 overseas ports globally, many of which are key components of the BRI. These ports are carefully selected to provide geopolitical leverage over critical global sea lanes in regions spanning the Indian Ocean, the Mediterranean, and East Africa. The total investment into this global port network reached nearly $78 billion just between 2013 and 2022. These are investments not just designed for quarterly commercial returns, but clearly for long-term strategic influence over trade choke points.
The Greek port of Piraeus is often cited as the definitive case study of how this operational influence is established and then leveraged to reshape regional logistics.
Piraeus is the perfect illustration, yes. It shows how industrial control is converted into logistical power. The Chinese state-owned giant, COSCO Shipping, acquired control of the port following the Greek financial crisis. Since then, Piraeus has been radically upgraded and has become one of the top 6 ports in Europe by cargo throughput, a massive turnaround. Critically, this control allowed COSCO to establish a powerful new logistics network, the China-Europe Land-Sea Express Line.
That line, if I recall correctly, fundamentally shifts the trade geography of Europe, bypassing some traditional routes.
It does. It bypasses traditional, often congested northern European ports like Rotterdam or Hamburg, connects directly into Central and Eastern Europe via rail corridors originating from Piraeus. And COSCO didn't stop at the port. Its subsidiary, Ocean Rail Logistics, acquired a controlling stake in Pearl, the railway operator running freight trains from Piraeus through North Macedonia and Serbia right into Central Europe.
Wow.
This means COSCO controls the entire logistics chain from the ship leaving China, docking in Greece, and then moving inland via rail. End-to-end control.
This demonstrates how controlling just one strategic port allows them to create influential logistics networks that fundamentally intertwine local economies with Chinese logistical interests, giving COSCO immense market power to manage trade flows through its preferred controlled channels.
Absolutely. This intertwining creates deep economic dependency. European countries, particularly those in southeastern Europe, become increasingly reliant on COSCO for the fast and efficient shipment of their goods. The logistics networks established, like those coming out of Piraeus, are sophisticated, they're capital-intensive, and they wouldn't be easily replaced. This creates a significant pressure point for those regions and, arguably, for the broader EU trade structure.
Okay, finally, let's tie this back to strategic fleet expansion and internal supply chain resilience. Ensuring that as global trade expands, China's own ships are carrying China's most critical goods. That seems like a key part of the security aspect.
This is the ultimate self-insurance policy, really, and it's mandated through national strategies. Chinese SOEs like COSCO Shipping and China Merchants Group are actively expanding capacity specifically to prioritize the transportation of key strategic materials, things like crude oil, liquefied natural gas, LNG, iron ore, and grain, getting those carried on Chinese ships. This reduces reliance on foreign flag carriers and dramatically enhances China's supply chain security. It's about controlling their own destiny.
And we see this leverage being used commercially to further support the domestic industrial base too, kind of closing the loop again.
Precisely. In major shipping deals for critical resources, we see commercial leverage explicitly supporting those indigenous mastery goals we discussed earlier. For example, in a massive deal involving Sinopec to ship LNG from Australia, it was actually included as a requirement that the highly complex LNG vessels must be manufactured in China. This demonstrates the sophisticated, systematic use of purchasing power and commercial mandate to directly support and scale the domestic high-tech shipbuilding industry, ensuring the financial engine keeps running and the strategic blueprint is executed right down to the letter.
It seems undeniable then. The entire structure, From the binding industrial plans and the massive state-backed financing to the relentless pursuit of domestic technological mastery, the integration of physical and digital assets under MCF and Lojink, and the global projection via the BRI. This is not a series of isolated commercial successes. It is a meticulously engineered, integrated system designed for sustained industrial and logistical dominance.
That's the critical takeaway, I believe. The design behind China's maritime success is perhaps the most powerful and comprehensive model of state capitalism and long-term industrial policy seen globally in decades. It has demonstrated an extraordinary capacity to mobilize capital and resources, enforce policy direction across massive state industries, and adapt quickly and decisively to new technological challenges, like the green transition. This coordinated, integrated approach ensures China will remain the central architect and logistical linchpin of global trade for the foreseeable future, making the sight of a ZPMC crane loading a CSSE ship with a CIMC container a ubiquitous symbol of global supply chain power, just like your friend observed at the port.